All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to week a lot. You do not see Gary because he is off visiting family in Newton, Kansas, which, if you've ever had the opportunity to go to Kansas, that's suburb. And by calling it a suburb, that's being generous. Of Wichita, Kansas, which calling Wichita, Kansas a city is being generous. So again, it's not that bad. That's my old stomping ground. So Gary and I, share a lot of fun stories about Wichita since he lived there for a while. But anyway, he is not joining this week, so you're stuck with me and Jack. Good news about that is you're stuck with me and Jack. Bad news about that is if you're trying to settle in for noon, chances are that we're going to noon is probably pretty low because we're going to be direct to the point and hungry. So we're going to want to get out of here. But we'll stick around and answer any question that you guys have. Also, Jack is in his dream ride, calling from the car. So he's having a good time. His dog's going to therapy, and I'll let you guys run wild on what the imagination for that is. But anyway, we're going to talk about succession planning today, and it's more around kind of the hey, this has been fun to talk about. We're actually going to take any action about this type of discussion today. But before that, what I wanted to kick us off with is brief discussion around taxes, and then turn it over to Jack to talk about a couple current events this week, including the stopgap measure on spending. In terms of taxes, it's funny. I started getting texts from people about how, hey, isn't it great? Now we've got these good depreciation rules back in effect because Congress has passed some tax legislation that brings back 100% bonus depreciation. And I had to break the bad news to them that, equipment salespeople should not play tax professionals on TV. By Congress, one house, the House of Representatives, has passed tax legislation. There's still nothing that's been done in the Senate, and there's no law on tax legislation that's retroactive to 2023 with respect to depreciation. So, I'm pretty optimistic that something actually will get done here since there was such bipartisan support for it in the House. By bipartisan, I'm talking like real bipartisan. I think there were only like 70 nays on the thing. And, for the people that are like, well, what do I do about my tax return then? What we're doing at BGW is that first off, if we can section 179 stuff, we're going to do that anyway. But if bonus depreciation was going to be the strategy we take, which is where this falls for 100% depreciation, or the place in service was too high or whatever for the section 179 limitations, you don't lose the depreciation. We can always do an election to catch it up, or otherwise amend the return if we have to, if you're someone that wants to file on time. Otherwise, we would just extend your tax return. So that's generally the game plan that BGW is taking. Jack, what do you have for us this week?
All right, so a couple of things. First, yes, I am in, and I know that Adam knows this when I said it right before we got on. So I'm in a Subaru WRX STI, and it's a car that is on a poster in my son's room. My SUV is getting serviced, and usually they just give me a loaner and say, I'm like, okay, 4 wheels and engine and brakes, all good. But I saw this one in their used car inventory. I said, can I borrow it, please? And they said, sure. So there's all kinds of instruments like peak, PSI, boost PSI, acceleration percentages, SRH, C differential, which is on automatic. I'm just driving it and hoping that I don't stall. Of note, if you ever end up driving this car, if you do stall it in the middle of Providence Road, it takes about 30 seconds for the push to start to reset. So just expect a lot of people honking their horns, even if you have your emergency flashers on. Secondly, no, that is not Gary in my backseat. That is my elder dog. And we're going to therapy. and physical therapy, not my therapy with the dog. And just to prove once again that we're always being listened to, as I was leaving the house and I was assuring my younger dog that I would be back, and I said, I love you. My Apple Watch then responds to me and says, "You are the light of my life and the wind underneath my wings." Because I said, I love you to my dog. So you're being listened to all the time, by the way. All right. So on a more serious note, a quick update on what is going on with Congress and the appropriations bill and stopgap. So I don't know if they actually voted today, but they're scheduled to vote today because tomorrow is the kind of drop dead deadline on appropriations funding the federal government. So a partial shutdown was looming. As we've talked about before, they keep kicking the can down the road, and in true form and in tradition, they have done it again. But what they've done is they've extended it for a week until March 8th for them to look at a more robust resolution and funding. And then there is a March 22nd date for some of the other funding. There's 6 bills that are covered dealing with agricultural department, FDA, commerce and justice departments, science, energy and water, interior department, military construction, Department of Veteran Affairs, transportation department, and housing and urban development. So a lot of the major or larger regulatory agencies and departments within the federal government. There's also deadlines to extend defense spending, homeland security, state and foreign operations, while until March 22nd, until they get through the broader agreement, and then funding through September. They're supposed to vote today, and I mean that's pretty much it. But they again put a band-aid on it, punted it till later, and so hopefully it'll be resolved next week, most of it. But it's just the fighting continues on. Everybody wants what they want, a piece of it, and so that also impacts the foreign aid to other countries with respect to the wars that are going on and the aid that has been requested. So that's what's going on with U.S. and foreign affairs, essentially, with respect to the appropriations bill.
Yeah. Yay, the only job where you cannot do your job and then still get paid a lot and have a pension. Healthcare benefits. I don't know about you, Jack, but generally when people are passive aggressive or aggressive aggressive and then quietly quit or aggressively quit, we usually fire them at BGW. I don't know what you guys do at Shoemaker.
Yeah, it's a mix. Sometimes we're a little more generous than I think we should be, but yeah, people need to do their job pretty
Yeah.
much.
Unbelievable. All right, cool. Well, hey, so this week, what we thought we'd talk about, since we can't, since there's nothing that Adam can currently do about the stopgap funding measure or getting the Senate to pass tax reform other than what Adam has already done, which is to vote and then let my congressional representatives know that they need to do their job. What we talk about is just, what are the things that we can do something about? And what we can do something about is, kind of revisiting the topic of secession planning and more specifically, getting around to it. Right, Jack? Because I think what I've found, and maybe you could share some of your experiences too, Jack, is that the topic of, hey, I actually want to get my business to the point where I don't have to be here every day, to where it's like an active choice if I want to be here every day. That's one of those things, sort of like, you know, I'll go to the gym tomorrow, you know, I'll start the diet on Monday, you know, and then you don't, because you didn't really say, well, what Monday? So I think our point in bringing it up is, trying to strongly encourage everybody to make 2024, even though it's already started and we're 2 months in, 2024, the year that we say, okay, let's actually do something about this. Because what I'll say too, what's really funny about this is, quick question, Jack. How many people do you know of that regretted eating a salad for lunch?
Um, Not many, except around 4 o'clock when they're starving. So it really depends
Yeah,
on the circumstances.
now I
But
got you.
yeah.
Going
Yep.
going for going for a quick jog. Anybody regretted that?
Well, it's funny that you brought up my two downfalls of the week, which is I've only made it to the gym once, and it's Thursday, and I because my wife is out of town, and it's just my son and me, ordered two large pizzas, and actually a full size one is still in the fridge from last night. So yes, not doing very well on those two things. But thanks
Well,
for bringing that up.
you weren't entirely gluttonous, so well done. Probably because you told yourself as soon as my wife comes back, I'll get back on the wagon and I'll start exercising and going back to the good diet again, right? So there you go. Anyway, so the point in sharing that is that there's sort of no downside to what we're about to cover off on in terms of actually starting the process. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now.
And
Okay.
while you're doing that, Adam, I would say that what you'll hear from both of us is that we've talked about these things previously, and sometimes we've talked an entire hour, or maybe have two sessions on some of these things. So a lot of it is some of it is review, but this is the time. It's first quarter. I mean, it's almost 2 months into the first quarter to start to continue to think about these things. And there's when with the outline that you have, think about also kind of the thing, and we'll expand upon those things. But I was thinking, for example, in the year one, you talk about those things, but there is the emotional, psychological aspects of these things as well. And I think that we, as business owners, sometimes as employers, as parents, as coworkers, make certain assumptions about what is going on in the mind of the other people around us, and then we use those assumptions to move forward through this process. So as you're describing, as we go through year 1 through 5, think about not just from your perspective, these things, but think about from other people's perspectives that are in your life and your kind of constituency of people, whether it is your coworkers, family, spouse, children, those kind of things.
Yeah, no, I know. And going back to, is there any downside here? You're like, someone, listening to this at some point would say, well, is this really relevant to me? Because I'm really not going to sell my business in the next 5 years. So I really need to do anything. I think the question to ask yourself is, um, do you think that it's a good idea to work 3,000 hours in a year for $15 an hour and have a stroke? Potentially. I mean, that's an over exaggeration, maybe. But that's kind of the all roads lead to me um, version. Or do you think it's a better idea if I spend some time, grooming people to potentially, um, do the job so I may have a vacation, sir? It's no different from like, do you think it's a good idea, to eat the two large pizzas, Jack? Or do you think it'd be a better idea if you ate, perhaps a salad and some fruits and vegetables, somewhere in that mix? Like, you're on mute, buddy. You're on mute. You're on mute, Jack.
Sorry, I was gonna say I did have salad with the pizza last night, so in my mind was okay. I would also say, add to your list, Adam, is that the regrets. I mean, so start now and then not figure out in year 4, if or 3, when you're going if you had gone through this process, that okay, if I had done those things that Adam told me to do in year 1 and year 2, starting now, then I might have more time to spend with the kids, with the grandkids, and with my wife, with or hobbies or whatever it may be. If you start thinking as it's a succession, not just an actual succession, but it's a succession of you personally in your life, and so to your point about working a gazillion hours in a year, you think about it that way, it's from a different perspective as well.
Yeah, that's right. So, shifting to the roadmap itself, this is a 5-year plan. Could you do it in 3 years? Sure. could you do it in 1 year? No, not really. I mean, and that's not to say like, I mean, does it really take 5 years to sell my company? No, it doesn't. Honestly, most businesses that don't have major skeletons in their closet can be sold within a year. From like beginning point of like, hey, I'm thinking about selling the company, hiring the investment banker, finding the buyers, accepting the offer, going through diligence, stuff like that. I mean, that a year is an extremely reasonable time frame. I think the issue that Jack and I have always seen is that, yeah, but if you didn't do any of this pre-work ahead of time, you're just you're leaving money on the table, because you're going to get a lower valuation, and you're just going to make your life that much harder because the conclusion of the buyer is that, yeah, this place doesn't have their crap together. I'm gonna need to keep Jack around for a while, to make sure the crap doesn't break. Versus like what we'd all love to do, which is here are the keys, enjoy yourself. Have a nice ride in the Subaru WRX. So anyway, what should you really be focused on in the first year? It really is understanding, well, what are your problems that you need to address, and kind of laying out the roadmap for the subsequent years. And then you spend, a year, 2 years fixing your challenges. That may seem a long time to say, hey, I'm really going to spend 2 years fixing a problem. I think based on our experience that when you have to do kind of process and culture change, it's sort of like if you go to the doctor and say, doctor, I got a cold. What am I going to do? And they're like, well, you could take, this medicine that I'm going to give you, and you'll be cured in 7 days. Or you could just go home and rest, and you'll be cured in 7 days. Like, in other words, like it doesn't, nobody can fix a problem in a day. Like you can fix little problems in a day, but you can't fix kind of major systemic process issues in a day. You really have to kind of settle in for the ride and realize that, fixing everything that may be wrong is a multi-year committed process. And that's like if you're really on it. I mean, I'm sure this isn't the case at Shoemaker Jack, but at BGW, there's stuff that I've known that's been broken since like 2010. Yeah, that dumpster fire is still burning over there, and one of these days I'm gonna get over that dumpster fire and put that thing out. It just has not moved up the screen of like criticality, at this point.
We have a physical room in the back that we store that stuff in. Yes. So
Okay, yeah, that's the dump that's the place where problems go to die.
yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
we have one of those too. It's called the IT closet. So we used to have a whole suite that we had for that, but then we sublet it, at some point. So anyway, it just takes a couple years, and then really, if you're the guy that says, what, or gal that says, hey, I'm really not selling, is this relevant for me? You could stop here. Like you could stop at kind of year 2 or 3, and just kind of hang out and keep on enjoying yourself, and building wealth, and then kind of move into step 4 and 5, whatever, or year 4 and 5, whenever you're ready. But otherwise, if you do want to try to get out, let's say you're, 50, 55, and, contemplating getting ready, it's a pretty structured approach, to make it happen. If I look at year 1, identify the retirement goals. What I also wanted to cover off on before seeing if we have any questions is, how do you go back to this identify retirement goals? How do you identify that? And it really starts with math. Math can tell you everything that you want to know, right, Jack? All right, cool. So what you start with is, what do you want in retirement? Like what do you need to make? That's your desired annual income. There's lots of formulas that are out there. Like some people would say you need a little bit more than you're making today. Other people would tell you you need about 80% of what you're making today. There's no right answer on that. You could use 100% of what you're making today. You could, or what you need to be making to fully fund what you're trying to do with your lifestyle. Or alternatively, you could use the 80% number, and use as your desired annual income, what you think that you're going to need in retirement. So if you take that multiplied by 12, you get, kind of a retirement value that you're going to need. Yeah, that's just a rule of thumb, associated with how much you'll need in your retirement account, to not outlive your assets. So then what you got to look at, which is really C, you're looking at, okay, well, how much do I currently have in retirement liquid? So if you've done a great job of saving and your liquid retirement is actually enough to cover you, and you don't need your business value to cover your gap, guess what? I mean, should you still do this roadmap? Absolutely. But is it like critical? No. You can tune out for the rest of the webinar and look up dad jokes on ChatGPT. But if you don't have enough liquid assets to recover your retirement, and the punchline really is, this liquid amount, for most people, given the median income value in Charlotte, it's going to be a couple $1,000,000 that you need to be having, liquid. That always gets depressing, for some people. What you're going to see is you're going to have a gap, that needs to be closed. So how are you going to close it? You're going to close it with your business value. So maybe the business is worth enough now, maybe it's not. Generally speaking, low end of the range, kind of book value to 3 times EBITDA or cash that you're putting in your pocket each year. High range might be 6 to 7 cash that you're putting in your pocket each year. Just, some people, well, don't I need to find an appraiser? It's like, no, you don't, not for this purpose. Like, we just need to be like ballpark, for this purpose. But that's going to tell you, do you have a gap? If you find that you don't have a gap, with the business value as it exists today, great. Do you still need to do all these steps? Yeah, you should, but again, it's not mission critical. Other than, well, I don't have a gap, but it's sort of like, I'm driving with 20 miles left in the tank. And I really would like to have 100 miles, left in the tank. So because then you can start thinking about, well, do I want to, that may be fine for me, but do I want to leave anything for my kids or something? Like maybe I'm going for, maybe what I'm doing here is now going for the wealth, the wealth creation aspect, because I feel like I have some sort of responsibility to future generations, or maybe I want to do something for charity, or there's something that's really important for me. But that's really what this gap is going to tell you, is what do you need to get the business value up to actually get your goals closed. And from that perspective, what does that ultimately mean for people from a gap perspective? Well, you got to look at, okay, I've got a gap. Let's say I have a gap hypothetically. How do I close that gap? Well, my gap is only hiding in certain areas in terms of business value. Area number one, the leading indicator of a gap is that, well, my cash that it's generating isn't high enough, multiplied times the multiple that I could get. So I need to get the multiple higher, and I need to get the cash higher to get to where I want to get to. So it says, so real world example, it's 100 times 3, that's 300. And I really need it to be, 500 times 8, to get it to where I really need to be. Totally possible, right? So that gap in value is hiding in a couple spots. You know, spot number one right out of the gate is asking yourself the question, why are you only at 100? You know, are you at 100 because you're spending more money relative to your peers, like your profitability just isn't good enough? Then focus there. That's where you start focusing on cost structure type issues. But that gets you so far. But then what you find is, okay, well, maybe the problem actually is I haven't grown enough. I need to grow. I need to focus on growth. And that's where you start hitting into the roadblock of, well, but if I add a whole bunch of growth, can I actually even manage that growth? And you start having process breakdowns. But that's really the process that you're going to go through to try to find, well, where do I need to go to work? In terms of fixing the value gap problem. You came off mute there, Jack. Did you want to add something?
I was gonna say, as an observation, if you do not know, the people around you know. So please ask your CFO, please ask your fellow people around you, because you can't know everything at all times. And so a bit of humility and asking for help is usually required if you are bashful in asking, because maybe don't want to know, or you're afraid of the answer. But you gotta be true to yourself and ask those questions. And then even if you think you should still ask those questions, because you will find that there are maybe other ways, and people that are willing to share with you their perspective but are afraid to, because they don't feel that you have empowered them to be able to be candid with you. So again, the kind of the I'm about the psychology of this process as well. So just think about those things. And I will say, going back to what you believe you need at retirement at 67, that's hard. I mean, you think about, and I think about it, but I don't think about it hard, because I'm just going and going. I know that money, part of my compensation goes into a bucket of my self-funded pension as a self-employed partner in a law firm. I know that some of it's going into an ETF, electronically traded fund. So I know things are accumulating over the course of time, but it's like, okay, have I really thought about what I need to have at 67? And it's usually, the answer is no, because you haven't thought about necessarily what you're going to be doing at age 67, what you want to continue doing, what you need to continue funding, whether it is a hobby or something else. And so that is, I think, again, the psychology of it is scary, because you just don't know. And I think people get paralyzed in thinking, okay, I need to know exactly so that I don't underfund things. And that you just gotta, and I'm just suggesting to you that just take that leap and start the process. Whether you talk to your CPA, you talk to your financial advisor, and help you understand this. You don't have to do it alone. And I know that it can be very paralyzing doing it on your own.
Yeah, that's right. But again, it kind of goes back to, I love the diet and exercise you know parallels to this. If I go back to the worksheet, and then I'll stop sharing my screen here for a minute, because we'll be getting close to the conclusion of the content portion of this presentation and open for the Q&A. But if I go back to this worksheet, it's sort of like I'm hopping on the scale, and I'm gonna go see the doctor and just recognize, where am I currently at? Where am I currently at? So I know what my health is, and I know what I need to do to make some improvements on it. So, what I'd strongly encourage everybody to do is, if I do nothing else, just fill out this worksheet. So at least you have an honest evaluation of where you currently at. So it's like, if nothing else, I have the peace of mind of knowing, even if I don't like the answer, I have the peace of mind of knowing. Or perhaps, I fill out the worksheet and I have the peace of mind of knowing way to go, me. You know, you're killing it, Jerry. You know, killing it. So, you know, I would at least fill out the worksheet, and then you can move on to, okay, great. You know, now what do I actually do about it? That again falls into, you know, years 2 and 3 in terms of continuing to take, you know, that $100 in cash flow times 3 up to 500 in cash flow times 8, which again is very that actually is very doable in 2 to 3 years. You know, if you really are focused on getting it done and making changes organizationally.
And I have a comment. You have, you mentioned insurance in the chart, and you mentioned it previously. So, what I see a lot, and actually recently, as of 2 weeks ago, is an underfunding problem, and it was inadvertent. And what happens a lot of times, so I'll draft an operating agreement that has a requirement for a right of first refusal to the surviving members, and so the deceased members, beneficiaries, through their, whether it's a trustee or their administrator or executor, is required to offer that ownership interest to the other owners. And a lot of times there's insurance that has been obtained and funded by the company. And when it was obtained, it covered 80% of that 25% buyout. So let's say that we're a $4 million company, just to make the numbers easy. So $1 million needs to be paid to the beneficiaries of that 25% deceased owner. And you had a policy for $800,000. So you covered 80% of it. Well, as time goes on, that $4 million valuation may increase to 5 million, 6 million. So now that $800,000 policy is not going to cover 80% of that obligation. And so you need to be mindful of that. And that's one of the things that we've talked about in the past, that, when you're setting up your budget for the next year, when you're looking at filing annual reports with the Secretary of State, when you're putting together your financials, this is also a good time to review those kind of things, like key person insurance, to make sure that you are funding what you intend to fund, and you don't find out that, well, we only have insurance proceeds for 50% of that obligation. What are we going to do? So just that, because that happened about 10 days ago to a client, I bring that up since it's part of the math of putting all these numbers together.
Yeah, I got it. And if you guys have read the chats, I want to address a couple of those from Papa Joe, because he's actually been through this process and did a fine job of it. And I think both of his comments are really on point. I'm going to go in reverse order. You need to add back in the benefits you had with the company that you were giving up, like car insurance, health insurance, travel expenses, stuff like that. Yeah, true that. Like, again, we're big proponents of owner fringe benefits, being tax deductible. There's ways to structure a transaction where maybe you can still get a tax deduction for some of that stuff upon a sale, but let's assume that we're not, and it's just, hey, I'm out, period, and I'm on my own. True statement. There's going to be, a handful, and by handful, I mean, it could be, 50, 60 grand that you're now paying for, post tax, that you just need to be considerate of, in terms of, hey, if I'm going to have those expenses still, I need to accommodate for them, and what does it take me to live? So when you do that first box of, like, what's my annual income, that shouldn't just be like, well, what's my check out of BGW? It should be, what's my check out of BGW plus, the health insurance, plus, the blah, blah, blah. That goes along with it. So good point, Joe. And then the second point that he brought up is the sad realization is when you actually realize everything is in place and you can leave without any detriment to the company. That hits the psychology that Jack was talking about there. And that's very relatable. It's actually one of the biggest things that we worry about, when we advise people on leaving their business. And it's something that Jack brought up at the very beginning that he can editorialize on here in a second. But it's kind of the look, if I haven't imagined what life looks like after I'm done, it's going to be very hard for me to be done. That's kind of challenge number one that you have to take on. That even if you've done all that, like you've done everything you need to do, um, you still have the mindset shift of like, you know, wow, you really don't need me. It's like that scene in About Schmidt, here are all my files. And they're like, oh yeah, thanks for the files. And then you walk by the dumpster and there's all your crap sitting in the dumpster, right? It's like, really, after 50 years is what we're doing. That's a very real thing. And it's hard, that's really hard. I think that the most, and that happens to men and women. Obviously Joe's a guy, and I'm guessing he didn't post that if he didn't feel it at some point. So it I think the closest parallel that I could think of would be, when the kids leave home, because I'm an empty, I'm an empty nester now. You know, Adam's mindset is freaking did it. That's the brass ring. Train these kids well, got them ready for adulthood, way to go. And that is the dominant mindset. A little bit of the mindset is, man, I'm really gonna miss them, and they're not gonna need me anymore. Wife, even though she knows, like, intellectually she has the same attitude that I have, that is not her emotional mindset. Her emotional mindset is exactly like Joe's describing here, which is the kids don't need me anymore. What's my purpose of being? So it's just something to look out for because it happens to everybody. So it really, it's funny when I had to face that myself, it was kind of less about um, leaving BGW and more about, I had an employee that I trained up, groomed, was counting on him to be part of my succession plan, critical member of the team. And then he freaking left and started his own firm. This is early on. And like, I was very angry and not, uh, you know, did not behave like the rational human being that you see on these webinars when he gave me the news. And his reaction was like, wow, I didn't think you'd have that reaction. I've never seen you, kind of use all those words in one sentence, directed at me. And, my attitude at the time was if he was on fire, I would not piss on him to put the flames out. So, I came home and I explained this to my wife again. And her comment back to me was, I don't know, shouldn't you feel really proud of yourself that you did such a great job of training him that he now feels capable of, starting his own firm? Like, that's actually an amazing testament to your leadership. And she was dead serious. Like, go to hell. So it really, it really is like one of those, got to wake up in the mirror and be Stuart Smalley, give yourself a positive affirmation. It's like, you're right, it is sad. At the same time, be very proud of yourself because you did the hard work to put the company in that position. And it's actually an amazing testament to your leadership. So what you got on that one, Jack?
So I'm laughing out loud and laughing internally because yeah, I had a similar situation, but a little bit different. So a couple weeks ago, lost my franchise paralegal. She went in house to a franchisor, and I was upset. I wasn't as obviously upset, and but I mean she's a young kid. She is getting married. Front part of her life, essentially, professional life. And so, but similar conversation, she was with me for 2 years. And to train someone in the arts of franchise is not easy. I mean, it's very technical. And so I spent over 2 years doing it and kind of got the same reaction, which is, well, obviously someone in house in a franchisor really valued her and the skills that you taught her. But for me, it's now I have this hole in my professional practice, and I have to do things now that I really don't want to be doing at my age and grade. That sounds very self-serving, but I mean, it's the reality. It's okay. I put my time in, I got it to a certain place. So now I take two steps back to take one step forward again. But since we are sharing a little more personal stuff, so similar situation, which I'm only a few months away from being an empty nester. And so my wife has accused me of dragging her back from Charleston, South Carolina to Charlotte way back when I started my professional career. So in her mind, she's already in Charleston, um, actually working because she can do it remotely. I can kind of do it remotely too. And so, apparently that's where we're retiring in Charleston. And so, but I know that, and I have to know that. If you don't know kind of where, and again, this goes back to know your peeps, know your people around you. What are your thoughts about the next 5 years? What are your thoughts about retirement? What are you going to be doing in retirement? So am I going to continue to scuba dive? Am I going to, all these other things that, I won't be driving these cars because apparently I'm not very good at driving a 6 speed, but I'm getting there. I might have to purchase a new clutch for this car. I'm not sure yet. But just know and know, make us be careful with assumptions too. And I've seen a friend of mine who's older made an assumption that oh yeah, they'd move back to where the grandkids were at and kind of hang out with them, and they assume that their kids really wanted that. Their kids really didn't want that because apparently they are more intrusive than grandparents might ought to be, kind of thing. So again, the psychology of it is important beyond, we focused on the numbers today for the most part, but it all kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, that's right. So Bruce had a good comment in the chat, which is the example sounds like considerable focus on succession planning, but not on bench strength up and down the organization. It's a good observation, Bruce. And I think, while we call it succession planning, if we go back to, I'm not going to share the screen again, but if we go back to that year 2 and 3 in terms of, okay, kind of plug the holes, start developing processes where you don't have any processes. If you're going to grow, you probably need some scale. A byproduct of that is you got to build bench strength, in terms of like having the right people in the right seats, that, and again, going back to, Jack's a franchise attorney. um you know uh, he knows more than most in terms of like what it actually means to document how you're going to run your business as if it is a franchise. And it comes down to like having something that I can give to somebody who has a limited amount of training, yet they can operate it, and it works. Because if you think about like a franchise in and of itself, I mean, what's the typical new franchise training time within your client base? I'd suspect at best it's maybe a month, Jack.
Yeah, there's focused training, but there's also, yes, so it takes a little bit of time. And I would also say, so when I'm talking to business owners and they say, hey, look, I want, I know I have two choices of growing my business via distribution. So it's either I do the distribution myself or I set up a franchise system to do that. And I can still do it on my own with my own company owned stores. The two things that I say to prospect franchisors, business owners, to make sure that they really want to franchise is two things. And I've actually talked people out of franchising, or I said basically you're not ready yet, and you may never be ready. But, and I've said this before, if one, you are a control freak and have to do everything and it has to be your way, then you're going to have problems. And I think that applies to non-franchise businesses. You have to be able to delegate things to other people, and you have to trust them. How do you trust them? Well, you train them, and you have to, you have to learn your way of doing it. The other, to Adam's point, is, franchisors, they give you a rule book and it starts out with a disclosure document, and then operations manuals and instructions, and it's constantly changing. If a business owner cannot memorialize how they run their business so it can be replicated elsewhere in other geographies, then they're going to fail as a franchisor. So the analogy is, if you as a business owner cannot create systems, controls that to articulate what you do and how you do it, then you're going to have problems. And so, yes, that is part of, building, and you have building the franchise, and meaning building the business as your year 2 to 3 in the box. But franchise is used very generically, which is build the business so that it can be run by others, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. And it said that by doing that, it allow kind of your bench strength is really built from the standpoint of like, I've got enough of a stable of people coming up through a system that they, they can pretty quickly make a contribution. And, if someone leaves, it's not catastrophic to the organization, because someone else can kind of pick up and follow where they left off. Whereas in most small businesses, someone leaving, to Jack's point with the paralegal, like, again, Shoemaker's a big organization. I totally feel his pain, but the root cause of that, literally is like, you know, it we don't take the time to really document what that person does. So someone else can't really pick it up easily, and do it. And, at the same time, if you think about the converse of that in terms of things you need to fix in your organization, a lot of times things you need to fix in your organization are people related. Why do we not want to make people related decisions that are difficult? Because I don't want to do their freaking job. Which just is awful and never works out. Just like Jack, the plate of nachos and the large pizza didn't work out. Tasted yummy real quickly, but then there was a lot of regret afterwards.
Wait, you're adding nachos to the mix? I mean, I did not have nachos.
I do love a good nacho. So anyway,
Okay.
all right.
I do have an ask, actually, a plea, which is related to access to your stuff. Please, 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 please have your passwords somewhere where someone else can get to them in cases of emergency or otherwise. If you're going to go on a trip somewhere, abroad or wherever, I don't care if it's in pencil in a book or if it's electronic password protected spreadsheet. Just remember the master password. Because again, it happens more often than you would think, which is okay, well, you can't access the payroll system, whatever it may be. And so just please do that.
I would agree with that statement. All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? Do we have any questions from the audience? Hearing none, because my tummy's rumbling. Anyway, do you remember off the top of your head what day is our 200th webinar? It's coming up here, or we're going to do the live
It
one.
is. Yeah, it's the end of March, because I can't remember. I should.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed that I don't
Anyway,
know.
for all the hangry webinar people out there, yeah, thank you, March 28th. We appreciate that. Gary would like if Gary listens to this after the fact, here's my impression of Gary. Anyway, there will be food at that, so no one will be hangry. So anyway, we definitely appreciate you guys being on here and sticking with us. Again, any suggestions for content, we're all ears. We just try to keep it relevant and on point. Jack, anything you wanted to add as closing thoughts of wisdom?
Just as a quick teaser, I think in one of the upcoming sessions, I want to bring on my commercial real estate, one of my commercial real estate partners, to talk about two things. One is the buying and selling of commercial real estate, but also leasing new space leasing, renewals, and those kind of things, and just kind of a walkthrough of the where a lot of the gotchas are when going through each of those things. So, that is an upcoming one. I think may either before March 28th or maybe soon after.
All right, perfect. All right. So we had a couple questions that came in last second. Um, so from Matt, hey, it'd be great to talk about how you protect intellectual property. I'm sure Jack knows nothing about that topic in the future. So that's a good topic because we all have
Done.
it at some level. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we'll
like
do
one
it.
of those. Great, I could phone that baby in from Jack's
That's
perspective. From my
easy.
perspective, I'm like, ooh, I got to take that webinar off.
Uh-huh.
Then from Deborah, hey, if I sell a business, is it capital gains? The answer to that is, you know, typically, mostly, with the caveat that, if some of the purchase price is out, assuming it's an asset sale, which 99% of them are, um, you know, if part of it is a non-compete agreement or part of it is a consulting agreement in terms of purchase price, it's ordinary income. Also, if there's an assignment to tangible assets, meaning like equipment, accounts receivable, and stuff like that, and you don't have tax basis in it, that's considered taxable income too. So it is a little bit more nuanced, but I think generally speaking, for most, this is just a wild speculation, Jack, that you may get disbarred for if you comment on. But based on my experience, in a typical transaction, over $1 million, maybe 10 to 15% of it is ordinary income type items, and then the rest of it is typically capital gains type items. So that's a wild rule of thumb. It's fact circumstance. Like I said, he sound like an attorney. It's going to be fact dependent, but yeah, that's generally what I've seen.
Adam, I think you were on mute for those last 30 seconds. So, yeah, sorry. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All I heard was la 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 in my
Yeah,
head. So
exactly.
I'm fine.
That's Jack's way of saying yes. All right, cool. All right. Well, with that in mind, we're gonna close out. Thank you guys, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Good luck. Good luck with your therapy dog there, Jack. Oh, I mean, taking
Thank
the
you.
dog to therapy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
See
Have a
you
good
guys.
week.
All
See ya. Bye.
right, bye.